you, Richard.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Have that part of Scripture open, John chapter 11. It's normally how we get funerals. I assure you that no one has. Can I go through this, Lisa? A little bit silent, right? I'm meeting to the back. Yeah, I'm definitely. Yeah. Heart attacks in the room, but yeah, John 11 really expands this story where Jesus eventually says, I am the resurrection, the life. It's a theme of John. We're going to be in John this morning. It's the first time in this series when we're looking at this theme of when Jesus paused, that we're actually in the book of John. Mark, as you know, as we've spoken about already, is quite a pacey book. And we looked at a few miracles in that. We looked, first of all, at the healing of the woman who touched the cloak of Jesus as he walked past. The woman who had this issue of blood. And Jesus took a pause to heal her and by calling her daughter. Then we had the story of Zacchaeus on the other end of the economic scale from this woman who was impoverished, but equally deprived and ostracized in society. And Jesus chose to pause at the bottom of the sycamore tree and invite Zacchaeus to have lunch with him. Then we took it to the other end of the spectrum last week, where we looked at a mass of people, 5,000 men, not including women and children. And Jesus paused when he took the bread and he broke it and he shared it for those that were there. So this morning, Jesus takes a really peculiar pause. It's a pause that this is probably the most difficult one out of them all. The other ones you see, Jesus paused in order to interact with someone. This one, Jesus paused for a greater purpose and a greater reason. Even though his friend was sick to the point of death, one of his best friends was sick to the point of death, he chose to stay where he was for 2 more days and then eventually make the journey to the tomb of Lazarus. What looks like delay often is design to God. There is purpose in Jesus' pauses, and there is purpose in the pause that we're looking at this morning. And the question I want to ask this morning, the overarching question is, what does it look like to trust God when we don't have all the answers? For Mary and for Martha and for Lazarus and his disciples, they're going to weave this into their testimony. What did it look like to trust Jesus when we didn't have any of the answers at our fingertips? They're never just about the act itself, but it's about revealing something of the truth of who Jesus is. John wrote his aim, which was to reveal the deity and the life-giving nature of Jesus. His book ends with the verse that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life in his name. So everything that John writes throughout his book is to fulfill that end. That's why we've got this saying, I am the resurrection and the life, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It's so that people would recognize his deity as the Son of God, but also as the one who brings life in his name. So we have here the pause, we have the pain, and we have the eventual power. We see the full package in this story of what it looks like to trust God in our questions, and what it looks like to trust God specifically through this sign that John presents for us. And honestly, this is what challenges me, because when God says wait, I hear no often. When God says pause, I hear sometimes rejection. I've oftentimes prayed, maybe not for someone to be raised from the dead, but I've oftentimes prayed and God has either said to me no, or he said to me, wait. Sometimes God in his grace says yes as well. But I'm challenged, do I trust God when God is not moving as fast as I want him to do? Or even as slow as I want him to do sometimes? Do I trust him when he doesn't do what I think he should or he would? And do I give him glory when he says yes? Do I trust him even sometimes when it means change for me? Because even when the answer shifts from wait to no, or from wait to yes, the heart of God still stays the same. The miracle that John presents to us this morning is not necessarily the raising of Lazarus from the dead. The miracle is the full gambit of what Grace read for us. The miracle is that we would see Jesus in the wait and the pause, the no, but also the yes. So the three questions I want to ask this morning is, when God says wait, can I still trust his timing? When God says no, can I still trust his heart? And thirdly, when God says yes, will I give him the glory? So Grace opened up John chapter 11. Let me just read it again. I'm going to grab my water that's over here. I'll give you time to look it up in your Bibles if you've not got that open already. It says, now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one who you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, the sickness will not end in death. No, for it is God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. More on them, but Jesus also go and be with them. If someone is hurting, you go to them, don't you? If a friend you love needs your attention, you act in a way that is proactive. Why did you not first heard? Don't worry, I've got more questions than I've got answers for you this morning. I believe God's love is greater than our comfort. God's love for us, which he knows and he purposed, and he waited because he saw what they couldn't see. He waited because someone loved allows pain for a purpose that is greater than relief. I've seen so many times in my life where God has said, wait. And forgive me if this story is repetition. In fact, it will be repetition for some of you. By the way, I've got these slides up, Delisa, which are the points themselves, so you could, my thing's got a network error here. If you could advance that would be great. When we first, before we got married actually, way back, almost last century, we went to Keswick, the Keswick Convention. So it's the first point, Delisa. We went to the Keswick Convention and we went to a service, and at that service, the person was saying that they would, at the end, they would put out an appeal for people who wanted to enter full-time ministry. And I was working in transport at the time. It wasn't even in my radar. In fact, I was a student studying psychology, and I had a part-time job in transport. Sharon was also studying, as we did too, for the first couple of years of our marriage. But I knew that at some point during that talk, when the appeal came, that I would go forward, and later found out that Sharon also felt the same. So we went forward, and we, the guy came, he spoke to us and said, your next step really is to go to Bible college. You haven't been to Bible college, go and get yourself trained up. So we didn't activate it then. I went on and kind of my career progressed. Sharon eventually became a speech and language therapist, made senior in the department. And it was at that point where God said, okay, now's the time to activate, which we heard as a go. We were like, okay, green light, go, let's pack our bags and move to Bible college. We did. We went down for a day to kind of check out the place, and we were then interviewed in the back of that. We were accepted onto the course, and then just doors started to kind of close, not to the point where it was like really you had to, kick them. They weren't locked, but they were definitely, they were closed. And it wasn't the right time to, at that point, go to Bible college. And I thought, is this ever going to come? This was like 10 years hence from when we were at Keswick. And I was thinking, God, what's going on here? You've said yes, but what you're now saying is wait. And I was wrestling with that. I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. And we were at church that Sunday, and again, I know I've told you this before, but some of you won't have heard it. There was a guy there, an elder, who is still in the church and a really good friend of ours. In fact, when we were up in the summer, he was there, and we were able to kind of remind him of this story. But he said to us, he says, I really sense that God is saying to you that you've got an amber light. He says, maybe you've thought that you've got a green light, but he wants you to know that it's an amber light. And he wants you to know also that the light will change to green at some point, but at the moment it's an amber. He said, I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I'm going to leave it with you anyway. I said, Jason, that makes absolute sense. And he didn't know anything about the Bible college thing, but I shared with him, and that was great. But God had us waiting. I couldn't see God working really behind the scenes, nor could the disciples here in this story. They didn't really know what Jesus was doing. In fact, even at the point where Grace left off the reading, they then said, okay, let's go, let's die with him. They didn't fully understand everything that was going to work out. But Jesus in the wait was working behind the scenes. In the season of waiting, he mentions to them, he said, that you might know and see the glory that I have got. Don't rush ahead. This did more to shape them than probably anything else. It's one of the last miracles the signs that John records. As you scan down in chapter 11, it then starts to up the ante in terms of the raising the case against Jesus, so that he could be arrested. But the disciples would have held on to this. They would have known that his timing is better than their timing. For me, the waiting season shaped who I was. I can now look back in that and say there was purpose in the waiting. Sometimes the wait of Jesus is not to punish you, but to prepare you, to get you ready for what will come next. Not because God is slow. Don't see God's wait as a slowing down. See God's wait as an up in wisdom. So when God says wait, can I trust this time? And the second thing is, when God says no, can I still trust his heart? The pause is one thing, but when God says no, it's quite another thing. When God closes a door on us. Verse 17, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It looks like the story is over. Jesus, in a sense, has said no, even though we know what is coming next. Her words are echoed by her sister Mary in verse 32. She says, Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother would not have died. How many times do we advise God? We've got different sisters here, the same grief. How many times do we say to God, God, do it this way? Had you not done it this way? Or why didn't you do it this way? The Garden of the Temptation narrative is full of the devil saying to Jesus over and over again, if you would turn this into this, or if you would do this, then this would happen. Advising Jesus in the way that he should go. This again, this story is a foreshadowing of the cross. when they would shout to Jesus from the bottom, just throw yourself down. If you would throw yourself down off the cross, or if you're the Messiah, why don't you cause angels to come and to minister to you like they did to Elijah? But Jesus, in the no, also enters into our humanity. In this narrative here, we've got the shortest verse in the whole Bible. It's a great memory verse, if you're ever on that memory verse for the week. John 11:35, Jesus wept. Two words that talk about his humanity amongst his deity and that shape our recognition of him entering into our world. Jesus' ways are not our ways. The prophet Isaiah would speak to that in Isaiah 55, where he says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord." Verse 9, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." Another time, I remember when God said to me that it was a definite no. It was a difficult no, as no's often are. In fact, we shared it, those that were around about the time pre-COVID. We were looking at this building across the road from the church here. It's still there. But back in 2018, going into 2019, the council decided in their wisdom, I'm going to remain apolitical here, but the council decided in their wisdom they were going to knock down that building. And they needed another 100 car parking spaces in Bath, which made me a little bit frustrated, to the point of indignation. And we, as a church, discussed that. To those that were there at the AGM back in 2019, you remember that was going to be part of the plan. Little did we know what the future was the next couple of years were going to bring. But we prayed about that building. We went over to the building. We prayed and laid hands on the building. As a leadership team, we sensed that we were to pursue taking over that building. And we'd get a download, so we saw it from heaven, that was going to, what it looked like, and we could visualize the space. And we had to put together a document, and rivers of ink have flowed out that printer to put proposals to the council and what it would look like to have that building as a community hub. We managed to do the first bit. So if you walk past that building, it's there because of what we as a church were able to do. But they didn't use it for a community space. They used it for something else. But we had a 4-year journey where we felt God was saying yes, yes, yes. And then the doors were definitely closed. And they weren't ajar this time, they were definitely closed with locks and bolts and padlocks on the outside saying, this is a no. And I was like, God, we prayed over that building. God, we definitely heard you saying yes. What was that about? But God showed us something also in that season. I got over it. I got some of the answers, not all the answers. I still sit with some of the questions. But either way, God knows what he's doing, doesn't he? My ways are not your ways. Jesus said the greater miracle is that he's a resurrection and a life. The one who believes in me will live even though he dies. Developed a really fantastic relationship that opened up so many conversations around the city to different stakeholders. We were invited along to full council meetings. I use the term invite loosely. We made our way into full council meetings. We got the favour of the mayor. I had the privilege of taking the funeral of the mayor who helped us to do that. We became really good friends. We got to know all the children's services. They knew that we had their back. We knew that we were fighting for them, and not in a way that was going to look for our own gain, but we were able to meet with them loads and loads and loads. The councillors, we had really good favour from them because councillors can't say no very easily, I've discovered. And when they say no, there's always a no but. And that but was a really helpful but. But that tells me something deeper. It tells me that God's plan is bigger than my understanding to appreciate what his plan is. It tells me that God is with us in the middle. Sometimes there's no, and some of you this morning will be sitting with no's in your life. But sometimes there's no as a redirection towards something that is eternal. But it's never a lack of love. His no is never him saying, I don't love you. It's saying Jesus wept. It's saying that he is there with us. Take a moment and bring that pain to him. The pain of loss, the pain of the doors closed. God's not afraid of your questions. God's not annoyed by your disappointment. God is right there with you. Lord, even when you say no, I still trust your heart. Lastly, when Jesus says yes, will I still give him glory? Verse 40, then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of all the people standing around here, that they may believe that you have sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. There were stakeholders, there were bystanders in this miracle. They could take off the grave clothes, they could give Lazarus food, but the miracle work and the life-giving act belonged to Jesus himself. The yes belonged to Jesus himself, and so the glory belongs to him and to him alone. I did this that they would see and believe the glory of God. He is the one that calls out to the grave and a dead man walks out. That's the yes. But notice that the yes didn't cancel the waiting and it didn't cancel the no. But what it did was it redeemed it. And all the tears and all the questions now make sense in light of the glory of God revealed. It so happened that it was a resurrection miracle by which the glory of God was revealed. But it could have been something else. But the glory of God was revealed through it. And that's how God works. It's not just about our relief. Okay, finally we've got to the chapter and finally we've seen that it goes, the victor wins. It is that. But it's about revealing his glory. The cross of Jesus is all about revealing the glory of God. It's never just for you. It's never just so that you can say, well, I said to God this and God said yes. But it's so that we would understand and his glory would be revealed. Sometimes God's yes comes with celebration. Sometimes God's yes comes with change. Sometimes God's yes says it's time to move, it's time to change, it's time to transition. And this is where faith becomes obedience. So what about when God's yes says to move direction? This is where the story gets really personal for us. Over the past couple of months, Sharon and I have been walking our own season of praying and listening to God's heart. And through it, we've sensed that God is asking us to lay down ministry here in Bath Elim Church and to pick up a new baton. As many of you will know, I've grown deeply in love with God's ministry to adults with learning disabilities. Something of the character and the shape of God I see best seen through that group. where Jesus says, unless you see the kingdom of God like a little child, you'll never really understand it. And I find myself being ministered to more than I am able to minister to those people. Anyway, specifically in the charity that I am chaplain for about 3 years, a couple of months ago, an opportunity came up within the charity to lead the charity into the new season ahead. And so Sharon and I, began a season of discernment, asking of God to make it clear whether this was a wait, whether this was a no, or whether this was a yes. And through discernment, both on our side and the charity's side, we felt like it was a yes for me to move and to pick up this baton. So what does that mean in very practical terms for us as a church? Well, it means that on Sunday, the 21st of December, that will be my last Sunday as minister of Bath Elim Church, and where I officially step down from the church that I have the privilege to serve for the last 9 years. Let me make this clear. This is not goodbye out of weariness or frustration. It's goodbye because God is saying to pick up a different baton. This is a step of obedience. This is a step of trust. We sense his yes, not to an ending, but to a new beginning. We're laying down something so that we can pick something up. And the same God who's been faithful through 9 years, and we sang about it this morning, will continue to be faithful in what lies ahead. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Sharon if she wants to say anything. And then I'm going to come back up and I'm going to summarize the message. And I think Richard's got something that he wants to share as well. Because God called us to England, Shire, a while ago. Sharon, as I say, was working as a speech and language therapist. I was in transport. And then we came down to Malvern, to Bible College, where we had the most amazing time at Bible College. Then we thought we were going to be staying at Bible College and we were going to, continue to study and live on site. But God had different plans. They took us to Gloucester, studied Gloucester for 3 years. That brought us to the southwest. And my son has got a sort of a West Country accent because of that very reason. And then 3 years after that, God then took us out of Gloucester and brought us here to Bath, where, as I say, we've been serving for 9 years. And it's been a joy. It has been frustrating. It's one of the last things I think about before I go to bed at night. It's one of the first things I think about when I get up in the morning. I pray for you all every single week. And know that I've got a list that I pray for you every single week. And I'm able to recently tick some stuff off that list that have been sitting on that list for a while. And God is also reminding me that that season is coming to its completeness. Just a few weeks ago, they took a final decision in Parkside. And they know now what it's going to be. And they're pressing ahead with that. But for us, we can't continue to be in this church, not because we don't love you, we do, but I think it's because we love you that we can't longer be in the church. We recognize that as God moves us into a different season, he's also in that season and will continue to be with you as a church fellowship as you look towards assigning and appointing a new pastor to lead when that time is right. Did you want to say anything? No? Okay. Well, let me just, can I just do two? Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. But ultimately, we are so grateful to God. We're so grateful to God for everything that he has done. Whether God says yes or no or wait, this story here points to Jesus as the resurrection and the life. before he waited outside his own tomb, he faced his own no in Gethsemane and his ultimate yes on Easter morning. He's the resurrection, the life. He is the one that has shaped 9 years of ministry here in Elim Church and shaped years of ministry before we came here and will continue to shape as we go on from here. And that is the hope that we stand on. That is why we can trust God, not just for the next season, but recognizing that he is in the season that we are in. He is the changer of the times and the season, but he's also the God who says, I will be with you even till the end of the age, even when it feels uncertain. And there are questions. There will be questions, and Rich will probably talk to that a little bit. They will come. They'll come. The answers will come. But we trust God with the wait. We trust God with the no. And we trust God with the yes. God bless you.